My name is Wayne, and this is Type Tested. I have in front of me here today a particular gem. This is an Olympia SF typewriter. Now, the SF series typewriter was made for a decent while. This is a later era dating from 1969. And this is the parent model, that is the SF series, to the Splendid series. And in this particular era, this typewriter mechanically differs from my Splendid 66 from about the same time in almost no way. The only real difference that I've seen were the Splendid 66, the emblem here, and the fact that the margin pointers were red instead of black, and some different colored keys. But otherwise, it has exactly the same controls. It looks mechanically the same. If you take the cover off here, everything inside here is the same as far as I can tell, right down to the touch control here. And I will say it's very unusual for a slim portable to have a touch control. So this is a nice little feature. Now, with most slim portables, you have a very short key lever. So that means that the feel of this typewriter is a little different than you're used to. Olympia tried to optimize the feel of this by changing the position and the way that the type levers would operate. So the idea was that the maximum velocity occurred only towards the very end of the keystroke. I don't know how well that worked. As you can see here, it's moving all the way through. There's no buildup and then release of tension, but it does its job. It's a usable typewriter. The only thing that I would like to have seen would have been a paper guide. However, because there's this quite usable scale here on the margin and on the paper bail, so long as these two are reasonably closely aligned, you can deal with it. You just have to pull the paper release back here and slide your paper around to where you want it. Now, this particular typewriter, now, another feature here is the collapsible return arm, which makes it a little bit easier to get into your case. This particular typewriter has two problems that I'm going to address today. The first one is that if you'll notice, there are some marks on the case here from the Carriage scraping. And if you listen to it as I move it along, you can just hear it hit. Now, examining it, turning this over, what's hitting is the bolt that's mounting the margin stop, and I can't raise it. So in most typewriters, especially Olympias, that problem would be caused by the fact that there are pads between the feet and the body, or there are pads between the frame and the body, the shell of the typewriter, to make sure that there is enough room for things, levers and so forth, to move without interference, because they have to dip a little bit below the frame. That is not the case on this particular unit. This does not have the typical shell. If you look, you'll see that there's a split here and here. What we have is a bottom piece and two side pieces. So without the pads, I have to look for another source of the problem. And the other interesting thing is that there are no scrapes on this side. And if I move around, it's not scraping. It's only happening on this other side, so I have to look for another cause. One potential problem could be an error in the setup of the typewriter. Now, this is a carriage shift, so as I hit the shift key, the carriage comes up, then it goes back down. For the lower case, if it's set too low, that can cause the carriage to strike, but it would have to be low enough that it would affect the printing. So let's get a piece of paper in here and test this. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. Since it's just a test, so I'm not going to worry about getting the paper exactly straight. And I'll note that this also has a bit of a slow ribbon lifter on the way back down, so it may not return all the way, but that's not relevant to this, and I'll deal with that a little later. So testing this, as you can see, there is no problem here with the alignment on the text. Well, no major problem. That's the text is printing properly top to bottom. So as I said, if this were really low, I would expect the bottoms of the characters to be cut off, because as you note, being a round platen, something hitting straight on, if the platen is too low, then the tops of the letters would tend to be cut off. If it was too high, the bottoms of the letters would be cut off. But since this is printing solidly all the way along, and I can do another test here. So here's some underscores. There's a slash. Everything's printing fine. There's not even any bleed. So if I go to red, everything's printing okay. So the problem is not that this is way off. Now it could be off a little, but the telltale here is that there's no scratching on this side. It's only on this side. So I am going to check one item. And that requires me getting a little slip of paper out here. It's just an ordinary piece of notebook paper, nothing special. And I'm going to check to see what's happening with the shift. Make sure that it's resting properly on both stops. Now in this case, this is the lowercase stop. So if I move the shift, you can see that move out, and you can see it drop back down. Well, it would if that weren't in the way. So here, I'm going to put a piece of paper in here, and I'm just going to see how much tension there is on the stop. And it's holding the paper very tight. So I'm not pulling it hard enough to tear it out, but just enough to make it act. Now let's go to the other side here and do the same thing. And I'll prop this up so you can see. And this is not holding at all. So the reason that it's scraping is because this side of the carriage is being allowed to fall a little lower than the other side. This is one of the things you need to check when you're refurbishing a typewriter, to make sure you have a balanced shift, because this is one of the problems that can come from it being off. So now what I need to do is I need to figure out what size that nut is. Let's guess, let's start with 5 and see what I get. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be 5.5, maybe 6. Ah, 5.5. So, looking at the thread, let's go ahead and loosen this up a bit. You never want to try to turn one of these screws with that tight. So now get a screwdriver here. Let's get a small one. Where did that go? There it is. And I'm going to hold that nut while I advance this a bit. Actually, I don't need to because I'm going that direction. Until I can feel it contacting. I'll use my paper here as a check. Until I feel it contacting the stop. And that feels pretty tight. Now let's see what happens here. Let me hold this and tighten that nut down. Get in there. I don't want to leave it as loose as it is because it'll move as I'm testing and just throw me off. So get in there. It's hard working at these angles. Yeah, get in there. There we go. All right, now that's tight. Let's see if I get any scraping. And no more scraping. Now let's double check my balance. Make sure that I've got it good on both sides. Let my little piece of paper go. I'll just use this other one. All right, so shift, tight, go back to the other side, get the carriage out of the way. Could be a little bit tighter. So I'll go ahead and do that, just to make sure. Tight, but I can pull it. And about the same over here. So that feels to me like it's balanced. Now, after having done that, I need to check to see if there is an offset. And it looks like there is. So I should be raising the lowercase up a little bit to match the uppercase. Because I don't want to take, since I've just had to put the uppercase stop down, so I've just had to adjust the uppercase stop to eliminate scraping, I don't want to adjust the lowercase, because in order to bring it up, I have to bring the platen down. Since I just had to deal with the scraping issue, what I want to do is I want to bring the lowercase or the uppercase down, which means I want to adjust that stop so it doesn't lift quite as high in order to get it to match the lowercase. And that stop, zoom in here. So here's the uppercase stop, or the lowercase stop, and that should be the uppercase stop. So I need to release that on both sides. And this is going to be a little difficult. May have to get a socket for this. Okay, so that's released here. What I want to do, I need to keep it from coming up quite as much. So I need to back this off just about 1/8 of a turn. So let me do that. Tighten it down, assuming I can. And I hate working in tight corners like this. So let's put the lock on. Give me some more room to work. Okay, now let's go over here and do the same thing. Control. Again. So let's see if I can get it so you can see it. So there's the lowercase control and there's the uppercase. So once again, let me loosen this up. If I can get in there. And detonate the return. Well, the problem with this particular adjustment is the stop is inaccessible without removing the side panels from the typewriter. So it's very difficult to check and see if this is balanced. So this is something that you really should do while the typewriter is out of its case. And I'm going to have to do that anyway for the later part of this, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. So let's see how things look right now. Zoom back out. Could stand a little bit more adjustment. Not worry about getting it firmed up later, because right now I want to show you the other problem, and that is the fact that this typewriter does come with a carriage lock. Now this should be engaged and this should be off, but the lock isn't engaging, and that's because this little bit here is the lock, and of course it's busy flopping around and can't really engage. So that requires removing this side panel in order to correct. Now this is rather easy. There's one screw above right here. And there are, over here, put that down, top back on here. Well, no, I can't do that. Okay. There are two screws underneath that have to be removed. That will be these two. This one does not contact the body panel. So I'm going to take this off. And please note that the top and bottom screws are physically different. You'll see obviously that one is one and one is the other. Please also note that getting these back in place can be a little bit of a pain, because you have to line up this hole, you have to line up the hole on the side panel, and you have to line up the hole in the frame. And that's always kind of a pain to do. So let me put this back up here. Lift that. Work the side panel out. Okay. And there we go. And now, I'll give you a closer look at this lock. This is something that I don't see mentioned in the documentation. If you look at this little screw here, all it does is contact the shift bracket. And it seems like this is a lock for shipping. I'm guessing that this is something that the dealers are told to deal with when they get one of these typewriters in. So if I tighten this all the way, the shift no longer works. So, and there's one on each side. So let me back this out a bit. And then let me move this nut further up here. So that it can hold this in place. And it looks like there may be a screw here that's missing. And I'll have to examine that, and if necessary, see if I can find a replacement. But for the time being, this will do the job, or at the very least, it'll keep it from flopping around so that it won't get in the way and jam the carriage up. So now what I need to do is I need to get the carriage back over here. I need to engage the lock. So you can see the little hook right there. That is your carriage lock. And you can see that I've got the lock right up against it. So now let's figure out what size nut that is. That looks to be probably a 6mm, maybe a little larger. Oh, may still be the 5.5. Let me get the carriage out of the way. No, I can't do that. Have to have it here. All right. We'll lose the hard way. So let me try to get this tightened just a little bit, just enough to hold tension. Okay, now I can release the lock, move the carriage out of the way, and tighten it all the way down. So now, it's not really going anywhere. And what I really should do is get some thread glue and put that on here to make sure this stays in place. Otherwise, through use, it will eventually work its way loose again. So I'm gonna have to see if I can find a screw to match that hole. I'm not quite sure what that would be. I'm not really good at judging screw sizes, but I'll see if I can get some samples and put it in there. Now, if I hit the carriage lock up, it will catch and lock. And since this seems to be something that can happen commonly, because that nut is easy to work loose, I thought it would be worthwhile to show how to fix that. So the deal is, you lock that, you put your arm down, you put it in the case, zip it up, and away you go. Anyway, an Olympia SF, work in progress, but showing the possible problems for body scraping and for the carriage lock not operating. Once again, my name is Wayne, and this is Type Tested.